Welcome to CurveBall DFI-ed. I'm your host, David Iofi, and on our 8th podcast, we have the pleasure of having Jordan Kelley. Jordan got a degree in entrepreneurship and finance from Babson College and was the founder and CEO of Robocoin and Handii for a couple of years, which are tech-based companies. In today's podcast, we will learn what drove Kelley into this business mindset and how he ultimately ended up becoming CEO of Enter Health, one of the fastest and most accurate revenue cycle management companies in the healthcare industry. Thank you so much, Jordan, for coming onto the show. Is there anything in your background that we missed? We gave a very broad description. Is there anything that you would like to put some emphasis on?
Well, good to be here. Thank you for having me. I imagine we're probably going to get into plenty of it during the with your questions. So I feel like we can just go ahead and kick things off.
Perfect. We want to touch a little bit back on your background. Obviously, we mentioned 3 startups that you have worked, that you did work at. How did you realize that you were meant for this entrepreneurship life?
Yeah, that's good. It's been I don't know, it's been a nonstop pursuit. I think that number one, it comes from just the weird, maybe masochistic desire to build and improve the world that we live in. But I mean, honestly, it's been since at age 19, I started my first company. I don't know, I had lemonade stands before that, but was always just trying to get into the universe of commerce and be in the middle of the action. I think that being in business, being an entrepreneur, you ultimately hold the keys to your destiny far better than anywhere else, and you ultimately get to shape the future that you want to live in. So I mean, when I was 19, we founded an international job website that was called Jobby that helped get like 100,000 plus people employed. We had like Microsoft and Sony and Kodak and Best Buy and the federal government using it. So like at age 19, that was pretty cool. And wound up partnering with an amazing guy who's still one of my best friends today, Lawrence. He and I wound up running that for like 5 years while I was still at school at Babson, while I was working at Credit Suisse. And the business kind of ran its course, wound up selling it to Lawrence, and I then started going on to a different path. Worked on a business for quite some time called Handii, which was a labor on demand platform. So, tap a button, get a handyman to your house really fast. I wound up selling that company after about a year. And then right after that, we had, right around the same time as I was operating that, I met my current day co-founder. That's John Russell. And John's like the best technologist that I've ever met. And he was actually at the same time building this crazy contraption called a Bitcoin ATM in his garage at the University of Nevada, Reno, when he was getting his master's in computer science. And John, likewise, being crazy, was also like moonlighting at Hamilton Robotics, building wild stuff. So I think when I break it all down, I don't know, being an entrepreneur is fun. It doesn't come without the pain as well. Like it's everything in life has balance, but to me, it's you own your own destiny. It's extremely fun to build products. It's extremely fun to sell to clients. It's extremely fun to change the dichotomy of how things are thought about and how they're worked on. And I don't know, it's just something I love to do.
Yeah. You spoke about how you started your first company freshman year of college.
Yeah.
Currently, right now, I'm 20 years old. I'm talking to a lot of CEOs, investors, and sometimes I do get a little bit nervous. Can you talk a little bit more about how those first deals went with like those big companies as a 19-year-old talking to these people that are like you that tend to talk to much older, serious people? How did you get yourself into that mindset that like, hey, I belong here?
I don't think you ever get into that mindset. That's like I think maybe eventually as time goes on, you get into that mindset. But I think at the end of the day, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you also have to have some irrational level of confidence. But I think the most important thing is that you believe in what you're selling, right? I mean, but I would always strongly advocate for not selling snake oil. Make something that you think people really want and have a lot of passion in it. And oftentimes, I think the kids with the passion are able to ultimately pierce through some of those corporate veils, or through, you're able to wind up leveling with people, but also, man, like the guys that are in the office that are in the 40s and 50s, or the folks in the office that are 40, 50, 60, 70, et cetera, they've just been there forever. I think, you know, most of the people are willing to take shots on young people, as long as the young people are not trying to hustle them in a bad way, right? So, like, again, have a great product, make sure that it works, and also be very transparent, communicative, and explain like the areas that you might be missing, that you might need a little bit of work on, and don't try and oversell on that, on any of those points. So just being honest and transparent, but also understanding that like the people that you're going in and meeting were once you, and they're probably pretty down with giving young up and comers their first shots.
Yeah, I think that hunger is something that's really important. And when one person recognizes that in another person, they kind of tend to want to
For
help.
sure.
Because like as you did mention, at some point they were in their shoes and they wish that they had somebody that could connect them with somebody or could help them in a certain way. So that's one thing that definitely I'm very fortunate that when I was in high school and I was in college, I got to go out and work in the construction industry. And I realized that that's not what I want. But if I didn't have somebody that was going to help me break into that industry, I would have never came to that conclusion. And here at 20 years old, I would have probably been in the same place where I'm at right now, but at 23 years old. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, you kind of have to just like go out and believe in yourself so much. And I don't think the imposter syndrome ever does go away. You just gotta kind of like make it seem as like it's the
No,
least of your issues.
there's always a new boss, you know, like there's always every level, every time you level up, there's always going to be just like some new crazy thing that you're like, holy shit, like this guy is like my hero and I'm about to go meet with him. I am nervous, but I think at the end of the day, you compartmentalize, right? You have to say like, all right, like no, like have a lot of confidence, have a lot of faith in yourself, and like I got this, and let's push forward, because again, yeah, everybody's already been there. It's just the road that we all take, but yeah, there's always leveling up and there's always crazier meetings.
Yeah. Another challenge that I do have as an entrepreneur that's still in college is that I feel like the education that I'm gaining is not what is going to help me in the real world. So I feel like I'm chasing the degree at the end of the day. You started your company freshman year of college, and then you still had all those years until you graduated. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of your education with where you're at right now?
Well, I might not be the best person to ask this to. I think the education was important. I went to Babson. Babson was a great school. I learned some, I loved the economics classes. Babson had a bunch of entrepreneurship classes. Like, that was really helpful. The entrepreneurship classes were really helpful. The accounting classes were actually really helpful. The economics classes were pretty cool. Some of the strategy classes I think were okay. I think that there's no better way of learning than either building your own startup or working at another startup, like where you have to go in and do everything. Um, I think the summer of my, or no, like winter break of my junior year, I was, I don't know, absolutely certain I was not going to go back to school. My dad was living in Hong Kong, and I called him one day, and I'm like, Dad, I think I'm actually going to stay in Las Vegas and keep working on the company. Like things are getting really exciting here. And he's like, I'll see you for dinner tomorrow night. So I flew back from Hong Kong, and he and I had a long dinner. And I think he basically said, see this through. You can do both. Babson's pretty lenient. Like if you feel like if you balance the work, right? Like balance the priorities is like if you have to study for an exam that is less important than putting together a deck for a new client, build the deck and screw the grade. But like at the end of the day, just finish what you started.
Definitely the winter break of junior year, that's definitely where I was at. And I definitely spoke to my parents about it. And coming from a Jewish household,
yeah,
my family wasn't too thrilled that I wasn't going to become a doctor or a lawyer. So kind of engineer was like the bottom of the list. And then when I told them that, hey, I don't even want to go to school anymore and pursue my company, they're like, yeah. You don't really have an option. You have to get that degree. Once you finish, though, you got what you want. Like, we would hope that you get your MBA. They're pushing for me to get my professional engineering license. It's just like a whole big mess. But fortunately, I'm very happy that they're okay with me working as much as I do on top of school, because I think that family support is always really important when you are at this stage, because that is when you're at your most vulnerable, because you're just trying to figure stuff out and you have all these meetings on top of school. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about how you managed it now, manage that now, as opposed to like when you managed it before? Because before you said that kind of like you put work as a higher priority of school, but now when you have a family, kids, but you still have the same workload, so you can't really be like, okay, I'll attend to my kids later. How do you balance it now?
I don't know. I think I've always been pretty good at balancing it, to be honest. I don't know if the little man needs to go to bed, or like if it's time to hang out, then hang out with the little man. There's priorities there. The priority, like the second that I had a baby boy, then that was everything shifted in terms of prioritization. But at the same time, what's really cool about the family side is it lights a new fire under your ass, and like you get, it puts a lot of things into perspective. So it's not just you doing it for yourself. Now you're doing it for your team. And I don't know. I think it's been mentally transformational for me, and really helping put things into perspective. But I've always had a pretty decent like work-life balance, um, which means I just work, a ton, and but still have a decent amount of good times. But now I get to have as good times with the family. But yeah, I think it really puts it into a really nice perspective, and um, it's nice.
I think that one thing that is interesting, I can't talk about this because I don't have any kids, but from the people that I have spoken that do have kids, they kind of said that like you think you're very productive in your business, but the minute you have kids, you become even more productive because
Yeah,
you still have the same amount of tasks to do. You just have less time, and you're so much more motivated because you want to succeed so much more once you have like this whole new thing that you want to like support and give the best opportunities to. So that's one thing that I am super, super excited for in the future, to have my own family and kind of have like that newfound fire. Because as hungry as I am now, I know that as soon as I have a family, I'm going to be even more hungry. And I think
oh, for
that's
sure.
super interesting about how you touched upon that, about how your like your responsibilities kind of adjusted.
Yeah, I mean, going back to to the question of like your imposter syndrome, or like, oh my god, how are you going to handle going and meeting with this new client or this new deal or whatever it might be. When you think about it from the perspective of, oh man, I've got a family to take care of and a son that will one day look up to me, I look at it like, okay, well, if he was doing what I was doing, what would I coach him on doing? What would I tell him to do? And if I'm not following through on that exact same on my own advice, then I am a weak ass hypocrite, and I'm not really in that business. Not really into doing that.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And you kind of spoke about how you want him to look up to you one day. Can you talk
Of
a little
course.
bit more about how, when you were growing up, who you looked up to?
Yeah. Yeah, I was really lucky. My dad was an absolute legend of a person. Likewise with my uncle. My dad was operating. So I come from Las Vegas, and my whole family's in the casino industry. My dad happens to be like maybe the best, like one of the world's best casino operators. He currently operates, he's the chief operating officer of a company called Galaxy Entertainment, which is the second largest gaming company in the world. He lives in Macau. He manages I think 10,000 people. Their casino does, I don't know, 1.25x the entire Las Vegas strip in revenue. It's absolutely crazy. But I mean, he's always been an incredible archetype. But I mean, I remember, not just from like a leadership perspective, but also from a human relations perspective, he has always been somebody that, when he walks through a casino floor, he remembers every person's name. He picks up all of the trash. And, I still go back to Las Vegas today and have lots of people are just like, are you Kevin's son? I was like, oh yeah, I am. And they say, tell him that Jim says hello. And I think when you create those kind of impacts on people and you treat them really well, uh, I don't know. It's a really good feeling. You know, my dad's a good man. Very glad to have been able to to study underneath him.
Yeah, growing up with somebody that has such a business mindset and is able to help you navigate, especially in those first couple of years, how he gave you that guidance about like stay in school, don't drop out, is
Yeah,
very valuable. And definitely
and,
your
and I'll
kids.
give you one. I'll give you one more though, because I think this other side of the balance is really important. The second part of my big influences was my first business partner, Lawrence. And Lawrence and I have been best friends since I was like 15 years old. I used to date his sister, and he, he and I both founded Jobby together. He and I were like every single Steve Jobs keynote we would watch. But he was always kind of the counterbalance of the family side. So like, when you have the entrepreneur, the risk taking side is always important. My dad was like, go and work on Wall Street. I think you needed the other side of the coin in order to really propel, I don't know, to kind of unleash or open up the synapses in your brain to say like, I can do this on the entrepreneurship side.
And definitely, you need somebody in your life that is able to help you, and whatever it is. Like I know for myself, I started reading Steve Jobs' biography by Walter Isaac,
Yeah,
right when COVID started, and I kind
it's
of
a great book.
saw what he was going through. That book was amazing. You learn so much about Steve Jobs, the person, and then after reading that book, all these like movies about Steve Jobs, it's like, oh my god, the book is so much better. That was the first time in my life where I was like, wow, the book is so much better than the movie. Um,
Yeah,
and I just kind of got to see the way that Steve Jobs was, and the way that he thought, and all these little things about how he paid such close attention to the small details. And ultimately, that kind of helped me get to where I'm at right now, where it's like, if it takes a little bit longer, but you get like the perfect um, website, or like the perfect interaction, the perfect email, and kind of through trial and error, you get there. And even if the task seems impossible, you have to motivate the troops to get it done. And I think that's what he did a very like solid job doing that. I think that he did it a little bit more of by instilling fear, as opposed to the way that I think that the way that he did it was definitely in like a bullyish manner, as opposed to like a more um, version that would be acceptable nowadays. I think that right now, if Steve Jobs was in charge, he would be in a lot more trouble than he would be. Whereas he's like, even when he was like talking to his programmers, like, get it done, or if you don't get it done, I'll say like what every single person did right, and then I'll make sure to say that what you did didn't work. Like that would
yeah.
be very not acceptable right now. But he was able to get the impossible done, and I kind of look as like him getting the impossible done as the end result, which is like one of those like motivational factors where it's like, wow, nobody thought it could get done, but it got done. And I kind of see that as the end result. And I'm like, how could you get that result, but doing it a different way? So definitely looking at things from a different angle. I definitely got that from him.
I think that's fair. But I'd also say that it was mission driven, right? So
Yeah.
we've got a crazy goal. Everybody saddle up. We're going to march to that goal together. We have no time for laggards. We have no time for weakness. If you're a weak link, you get cut. And yeah, sure, maybe it wasn't, I don't know, soft or easy or like, I don't know, the kindest way in the world to do it. But at the end of the day, what do people matter, or what do people remember? I don't know. People remember the results.
Yeah.
History is written by the winners.
100%. Like I'm very fortunate that I have such great people working at Team DFI with me in Levy and Lucas, and they are able to keep up with the workload that we do have. At first, it was kind of hard to balance it because I was working so much and I expected every single person to work as much as I was. But then I realized that, like, hey, what I'm trying to achieve is like, I just have to get all this thing done and just kind of like navigate and try to understand that not everybody could be working as much as I could, and then kind of chill out and zen and kind of be like, because I feel like when you're working so fast, you kind of do a little bit of everything and you're not doing 100% as great as it could be. And kind of when you do slow down and you focus on individual tasks, it does get better.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I definitely want to go back to how you were talking about your transition from Joby to Handii. you transitioned very fast. Can you talk about how you were able to come up with the idea for Handii right away and how you were able to jump into that position?
Like 2012, I think it is 2011, 2012. Uber is just coming out, and I was just blown away by that particular business model. It's like, holy shit, this is this notion of marketplaces is incredible. And what we built for Handii was really good. I think had I not also decided to co-found Robocoin, I think that'd be a very good business as well. But we got really excited about Robocoin. We found like crazy product market fit immediately. We launched it in Vancouver in October 23rd of 2013, and Forbes called it the machine that launched 1,000 articles. We wound up scaling it around the world to like 18 countries in 9 months. It was like Wall Street Journal, across the board. It was wild, man. We presented it to U.S. Congress. I flew to Rome to present it to Italian Parliament. There are now like tens of thousands of those machines all over the world.
Yeah. So it definitely sounds like you started these two companies and you were the CEO of Handii and Robocoin at the same time. Can you talk a little bit more about how like it was definitely you did mention about how it was a challenge because Robocoin was blowing up and Handii had like more of like a steady increase. And then kind of how you jumped like full steam ahead on
Handii still hadn't gone 0 to 1 yet, to be honest. It was still nascent. We were just doing like a few different jobs, and it wasn't really like accelerating at that point. And in order to take the company, basically, as an entrepreneur, any entrepreneur trying to take a company and launch it and get it to scale, get it to product market fit, get people using it, use that customer feedback to then continue to improve the app, continue to improve the service, and then go out and raise capital and then go out and start to build your company. Doing that at the same time while you're doing that for another company is extremely hard, especially like when you are one of the only people working on it. So it's a hell of a lot easier once you have a company. Like if you think like Jack Dorsey, right? Jack had Twitter. Twitter was good to go. Twitter was cooking. Decided to then also co-found Square, and then was able to raise a lot of capital for Square just because he was Jack Dorsey. Well, not just because, but a hell of a lot easier. And then building out Square, or building out the proper organizational team in order to build that business, that makes it a lot more palatable or reasonable, or a higher likelihood of success if you're going to do it that way. Again, if you're a fairly unseasoned entrepreneur, I'd tell you just focus on one.
I mean, Steve Jobs was able to do it with Pixar and Next, so that definitely.
Oh, again, totally. But I mean, he also invested in Pixar. Pixar was like more. It was less of like him actually starting it from 0 to 1. Like Pixar was like already there.
Yeah. I want to know a little bit more about your venture with Robocoin. So you left in 2015, and then you ultimately are where you're at right now, which is Enter Health. The transition from the crypto space and now going into the healthcare, how did you decide to make that jump?
Yep. So the Bitcoin ATM business was pretty crazy. Come 2015, we enter into a pretty awful crypto bear market. So like in 2013, I was the one explaining. I was shouting from the rafters, buy Bitcoin, and telling everybody how to use it and telling them what it was. So we were super, super, super early in that space. But 2015 came around, super bear market. And in addition to the bear market aspect of it, just kind of the nature of cash and Bitcoin kind of breeds a particularly unique user base, a little bit of a higher risk user base. And we were regulated by the financial crimes enforcement industry. Financial crimes, FinCEN. Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. So being regulated by FinCEN means that we had to submit what are called suspicious activity reports. So anytime, like as people are going in and transacting using our system, anytime that there was something suspicious, we'd have to report that to the government. that was less than desirable and not particularly fun to do. But really, the main issue with Robocoin, it was not the Bitcoin aspect. It was actually just the cash aspect. The writing has been on the wall for a decade now that governments are moving to a cashless society. So for us to continue to work on this business for 5, 10, 20 years, we would have had to bet that that's not going to be the case. So neither John nor I were particularly compelled by that aspect, and decided to, right around the end of 2015, we decided to open source the Bitcoin ATM software and give it to all of the operators that purchased the machines from us. We then took the underlying platform, which was a wallet, and converted it into a payments infrastructure, specifically for just US payments, and looking for what we really wanted to be when we grew up. Spending a lot of time in just working with a bunch of different merchants. The healthcare, we wound up doing some payment processing for some random hospital systems in the middle of the United States. And we were doing what's called patient collections, which basically means like after you go in, you see the doctor, and you go back home after you see the doctor, and then like maybe 30, 60, 90, 100 days later, you get a letter in the mail saying, hey, David, you owe us an extra $1,000. And then you're like, I don't even know what this is. I'm not going to pay it. And then, another 200 days goes by, and you get like, you try and buy a new car or a home, and you're like, you check your credit, and your credit is dinged because you have some random healthcare bill that you didn't wind up paying. So craziest thing is that 1 in 3 Americans have gone to collections and had their credit dinged or damaged because of a healthcare bill, because of what's called bad debt in healthcare. So we started doing some work on patient bad debt. So trying to build automated solutions to help providers collect their patient bad debt. As we kept working on that, it was like just super clear that particular business sucked. It was just, it was not, there's nothing worse than like having to call or text or email or send a letter to some person about like a bill that they didn't receive, asking them for $1,000 250 days after they saw after the service was rendered. It's awful. So it was not something that we particularly enjoyed. However, what it did illuminate was the underlying problem that as we started kind of scratching deeper and deeper into the problem, we realized that the main issue is not that the patient gets their bill 250 days later. The main issue is actually how doctors get paid, period. And that particular industry is what's called, there's a bunch of different names. We call it healthcare payments, but the industry calls it revenue cycle management or medical billing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely interesting story about the transition. How did your background and like your technology side and your education side, how did that all play into your current new role? Like, how did that help you?
Well, so I've been founding companies for a long time, and while founding companies, I have picked up a whole bunch of different skills. So I've always been pretty good at talking to people. I've always been pretty good at thinking up solutions, but through the career, have to get really good at a lot of different things. So the product side was the one that I typically gravitated to the most. So the design, the look and feel of the product, how it ultimately works, how effortless the solution can become. That was like where I found the most joy in some of my work. That, and then ultimately sharing that product with clients, and hopefully digging into their major problem and providing a great solution.
You mentioned about how your great at getting into the room. And obviously networking is something nowadays which is really important, and sometimes your connections are even more important as to your education. It's like about who you know, and that's how you get the job where you're at. Can you talk a little bit about how you were able to leverage your network or to get to where you're at?
No, I think networking ultimately comes down to effort, right? It's unabashed effort of willingness to engage with people, and I think asking them questions, right? Like that's the biggest deal. So I guess a couple things, right? Being super nice, always helpful. So being kind to people and seeing how you can help them, really a good way to go. Always a good way to go. Next part is not being afraid to engage with somebody that you think might not be interested in talking to you. And then, last part, I guess, is just being extremely curious. So, like, let me ask you a bunch of questions. Let me learn about you. Let me see how I can help you. But it's amazing how few genuinely curious people that there are out there that are like willing to engage and ask.
Yeah. In our previous podcast, we had the founder of One Village. Her name is
Hmm,
actually Asign. She came from the South, and she kind of said about how the Southern hospitality kind of helped her in the beginning of her career, because everybody was like, "Oh, you're so nice." So definitely, when you're talking about how the niceness does affect you long time, it definitely talks about how it does help you eventually. Um,
totally.
you did talk about how networking and sometimes getting in the room and not being scared to ask those questions with the powerful people or even like the people that you looked up to is sometimes hard. How do you, what advice would you give to somebody who is also in like a client facing role so that he goes and faces those challenges?
Um, I don't know, like do 5 push-ups, like jump in the air, like psych yourself up, and also just realize that you miss out. What is it? There's a very great quote for this.
You miss every
Uh,
shot you don't take.
there it is. Yeah. Um,
Okay. I mean,
yeah.
definitely 100%. I think that you have to reach, well, how's it like reach for the star? Oh, you aim for the moon and then you go to the stars. What is it? Like something like
Yeah.
that?
Go for the stars, hit the
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
moon. Who
Yeah,
knows?
so it's kind of like that. It's like I think that if you try, something could happen. And that's like the least that like if you don't
Yeah.
try, you never know what could have been. And definitely
Also,
with
also prepare, right? Like preparation. The harder you work, the luckier you get.
yeah. You are a serial entrepreneur and you have been kind of on this path for a long time since you've been 19 years old. What is one industry that you're never going to enter?
I would have told you healthcare, but I clearly did. That wasn't the case. I don't know, man. I think what we have with Enter right now, um, I think we're going to build one of the most important companies in all of healthcare at this point. I couldn't be more excited about what we're focused on. I think it's the largest problem in the space, and I think that um, healthcare, just the United States is a $3.7 trillion industry. It is enormous, and it is just rife with pain. Um, so I think it's something that I don't know, I can very easily focus on this for quite some time. Uh, what industry? I don't know. I mean,
Think
I'm
that for
not.
you, you've been kind of in all the industries where a lot of people wouldn't like a lot of people stay away from like
Yeah,
crypto, healthcare, but like you're in
yeah,
both of the industries that most people would not get into. So you
yeah.
can
I found that like I've for some reason or another been really early in a lot of different things. Right? It's like we were extremely early in Bitcoin. People looked at me like I was insane. We were really early in like kind of this health tech revolution, right? If you look at like healthcare is the new fintech.
yeah.
Where healthcare is where fintech was 13 years ago, and we're basically trying to build the Stripe to propel it. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. So yeah, that's a question that I'm woefully inequipped to answer when it comes to
Yeah, yeah.
what will I not do? Because I don't know. I'm opportunistic.
Yeah, it sounds like you're always early on trends and you kind of grow to a certain point and then you move on to the next project. It sounds like Enter is like your baby and you want to stay there for a while.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
maybe one
there
day,
were extenuating circumstances that that nudged those pivots right into different directions. So I think from where we're at right now, we like the world of healthcare. We like what we've built. We think that there's a lot more to continue to build, and there is so much market for us to work with, um, and really a lot of impact to share.
yeah. So you've been with Enter for the past 6 years. What have you learned now that you've been in the healthcare industry for 6 years that you wish you knew right away? So when you went in, you could avoid certain mistakes.
Oh boy. Um, I wish I had known, 6 years ago that I have to rebuild the entire payments infrastructure in order to do this business properly. Instead, we thought that we would be able to just cobble a bunch of like off the shelf software and products and buy as opposed to build. And that wound up costing us a lot of money and a lot of years. So, but with that being said, had I not learned that lesson, I wouldn't be building what we're building today. And, my lesson, what's fortunate for me is that I'm able to use my lesson and help other people not have to learn the same one. So, I had dinner just last night with a company that just raised like $170 million, some awesome VCs on the cap table, really badass business. And they're like, Jordan, should we we've analyzed, doing the, basically healthcare payments and integrating them into our solution. But we're trying to figure out if we want to build it or buy it. And we've gone through and we've thought pretty long and hard about whether or not we want to build it. And we're definitely leaning towards buy. And I'm like, guys, this is an area that um, this is an area that is just rife with misery that I've had to learn firsthand uh, for the last 6 years. So I've been living, eating, and breathing it and solving these problems. Now it is what we want to do now is just empower the next generation of entrepreneurs to build the best companies in healthcare to really drive amazing change in the universe in the industry.
I mean, definitely change is something that's going to come. And if you aren't going to adapt and change, like look at taxis, there's Uber is like eating all the taxis. And that's because they were not adapting.
Yeah,
And that is one of those things which is, um, it's like the old phrase where it's like, you have, wait, it's like, if you don't whatever it is, it's like basically you're gonna get eaten up. Like your competition, if you
yeah.
don't worry about your competition is gonna come and eat you up in the future. I did want to touch on a little bit about starting companies and how important it is to surround yourself with a good group of founders. What do you look for when you were starting your companies and founders or people that you did want to surround yourself with?
Um, Balance. I want, I think I want balanced people for me. Like when I'm thinking about as a CEO, I'm a extremely optimistic, um, want to please all kind of a person. I think it's really important to have a counterbalance to that, a highly realistic, a highly analytical perspective, where they're able to come in and say, like, Jordan, like, you just counterbalance. It's super important. The other, like, just kind of characteristics that I typically gravitate to is, people that are kind, people that are curious, people that are entrepreneurial, like, and they just kind of like a mindset, like where it's like when I think about entrepreneurially, I think about people who don't need to have a playbook, right? They're willing to build the playbook. They're willing to like roll up their sleeves and do what it takes and solve like problems, but also like they're willing to get in the mud and do the dirty jobs, because being an entrepreneur, being in a startup, You have to do a bunch of dirty jobs that like don't scale, that are like not very that they're not that cool. Like you're like, this is the, you're sitting on the phone waiting for, was it sitting on hold waiting for like for an insurance carrier. You're doing that for, I don't know, 8 hours for 2 weeks in a row, just so you can understand how people think about, like, just understand how these operations work. Like, so you have to be entrepreneurial. You have to have like a, you know, just a desire and a willingness to, and I guess like a love, right? Of like learning how things work and figuring out what the roots of those problems are, and then building solutions on top of them. So like, I think that is like what I think about as an entrepreneurial mindset. The next part is perseverance. Like, I need people that are willing to persevere, because doing this shit is really hard, and like you are going to encounter so many roadblocks and so many challenges and so many people that say no, and lots of loneliness, that if you don't just have like a consistent perseverant mindset, you're probably going to quit, and then, you know, the people that quit fail. So you know, you just kind of have to have like a no quit attitude. And then I'll finish with you know, I think a winning mentality, a winning mindset, where you believe in yourself, you believe you will win, you believe you can win any opportunity. Probably won't, in fact, I guarantee you won't. But you know, I think there's a great what is it? And you ever watched Ted Lasso? No,
No.
that's all right. Ted Lasso,
Sorry,
awesome show. Totally watch it. He has he like one of the characters, his name is Sam, and Ted's this awesome coach, and Ted's like, and Sam has like a bad game on the soccer field. Ted's like, all right, I need you to have a I can't actually remember the insect, but he's like oh, goldfish. He's like, what do the goldfish have? What's the best part about a goldfish? That they have the shortest memory. So it's like, be like a goldfish after you have a bad game. So quick, you know, a very short memory when it comes to forgetting mistakes, and moving on and moving past them.
I mean, 100%. And when you are a founder, everybody sees the glory and the success. Can you talk a little bit about the downtime of like when you're going, like when things aren't going right, and how you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, that's when you lock arms with your team and you march forward, right? Like, that's, you know, a good CEO, the responsibility is to ensure that everybody's marching to the same beat and on the same line. And when times get really, really tough, this is when you rely on your squad to align, to stay resolute, right? Because I mean, again, it's really, it can be a lonely job and a lonely business, but you know, this is why you focus really hard on bringing the right group of people together. And as the leader of that group of people, it is your responsibility to instill confidence in them and to plan and where you're going. And then you guys march down, you execute.
Yeah. I want to know like an actual event that did occur like through Enter or some of your other ventures, and how you were able to use that mindset that you just discussed to kind of get the whole team out of the trenches.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've almost died at, like, just this journey of this company a few times. Um, you know, we had one where when we first started Enter, the business was actually a factoring product. So like we had a credit and finance arm of the business, where we would go out, we would work with provider groups, we would take their claims, we would underwrite those claims, and then we would submit them off to the insurance carrier. We would also then partner with a credit facility, and that credit facility would advance capital for each of those claims. So the pitch to doctors was, don't wait for 45 days to get insurance claims paid. We'll pay them for you in one day. So really novel approach. And it's something that we could do today, but you know, it's actually not necessary with how fast we are at getting claims paid. But when we launched that business, we processed like $100 million in claims and advanced like $20 million on them. But all of the underlying technology that we had, to actually manage and get these claims paid was trash. It was like all of the stuff that the industry uses today, we used it, and it was awful. And we wound up having an enormous amount of slippage, and we're losing a lot of money. So like during this time, we had millions of dollars of capital outstanding that we were having to pay around 20% APR on, and we were just getting absolutely destroyed. My team and I had to make some really hard decisions. The hard decision was basically, do we quit, or do we figure out a strategy of how we can ultimately save this business? Some of our investors basically put us at less than 5% likelihood of actually living to see this day, which also was just like a really good fuel for the fire. But we decided to make a strategic decision, even though we had a bunch of business and clients that were using the factoring product. We decided we are going to remove the credit portion, the factoring portion of this business, and we're going to focus entirely on the payment side. We're going to solve the infrastructure that got us into the predicament in the first place, because everybody else is probably having that same pain. We did that back in the middle of 2020. And I think that was probably one of the best decisions that we've ever made. It was basically a decision where we all united. We said, we're going to simplify this business. We're going to have to lose a bunch of clients, and we're going to have to restart. But I don't know, we did it together, and we are in a hell of a position now.
I think it's really cool how you turned your weakness and your pain point and you structured it all into such a strength where you walk out of the situation significantly better than when you initially got in there. And that's super interesting because a lot of people, they do run away from their problems and try to exit, or just like kind of are like, okay, we failed, time to move on to the next thing. And I think that when you are able to move on to the next step, it kind of shows the leadership and the people that are backing you in each of those moments where it's like, oh, he's almost about to fail. Even in like succession, like everybody's like, oh, this is about to fail. And then I don't know, or something comes out and it's like, wow. And I think that leadership is super important. And it's moments like those where it seems like it's the bottom and you're like, oh my God, this can't get any worse. But then you see it as like kind of like a leadership moment where you get a chance to prove yourself for what you have and why all these people look up to you.
Agree. I mean, it's I don't think it's a matter of getting having people look up to me. This is just like I'm lucky to have a great group of team members that we love working with, and I think it was a big part of it was that we didn't want the party to end. We wanted to. We like working with each other. We like going in every day and battling. And I don't think anybody was willing to give that up.
Yeah, I want to get into we want to finish off the podcast with kind of advice that you have for people that are interested in knowing more about the industry. So we have kind of like a word association type of thing. So the first question that we have is what books would you recommend for people who are interested in learning more about entrepreneurship or the whole startup side of things?
Let me actually go into my Kindle. All right, number one, and this is not like a full on entrepreneur book, but I don't know. I love Atlas Shrugged. It's my favorite book of all time. So Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, always good. The Great CEO Within, the Tactical Guide to Company Building by Matt Mockery is excellent. Tools of Titans. That's a Tim Ferriss book. That's very good. Oh, I mean, and no doubt about it, 0 to 1, Peter Thiel. That's one of the best of all time. Actually, might be the best. I mean, I'd probably put 0 to 1 at the top there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah. We're definitely going to put all the books that you just mentioned and then the show notes. So if anybody does want to find out more about that. Another thing that we do have is that I do want to ask is how important do you think it is how old you are and you're starting a startup? Do you think that matters?
No.
Okay, very simple to the point.
No,
I
well, I'll expand on that just for a second. It doesn't matter how young you are to start a startup. Start the startup. No matter what, you're going to have to go through the pain, right? And that's the pain of building and creating the startup. This is the process of like founding the company, building your plan, building your strategy, building the product, talking to your customers, selling to your customers, hearing their feedback, hating their feedback, actually figuring out how to listen to their feedback, iterating on the product, continuing to go through this whole cycle. And then through that, like all kinds of drama, all kinds of angst, all kinds of misery. But it's also really fun because like it's your baby, it's your vision, it's your creation. And as like, yes, cool, you could be 16 years old and start your company. And I guess I should say this, like, I don't want an 8-year-old starting a company. Like maybe have the mind fully developed is probably a good idea. Like my mind didn't even, I don't think my mind fully developed until I was 26. I don't know. It was just not all there. But no, I mean, I think you do want your brain to be relatively fully developed. You want to actually have some world insights. You want to understand like how the world works. You understand how your problem that you're trying to solve really works, and like what your target market really is. So like maybe I'll backtrack a little bit. I'd probably say like if you do want to start a company really well, deeply understand your problem, deeply understand who you're going and selling to, and like do not like let that slip, but also don't let that hold you back. Like you don't need to go and work at that specific, like at a competitor in that particular market or field for like 20 years to figure it out. Like you could probably go and work in there for 3 or 4 months, get some good contacts and some insight, and get busy.
Makes sense. Thank you again for coming on to CurveBall and sharing your story. It was a pleasure of having you share your story with us and the audience. If anybody does want to reach out or learn more about Enter Health, we'll put all the links in the description for the podcast. Do you have any closing remarks or something that you want to share with the audience?
No, man, it was good fun. Anybody in the audience that is looking for that needs to connect, please reach out. If anybody in the audience happens to be in the world of healthcare, and they, and they are like all of the other people that hate revenue cycle management or medical billing or what we consider healthcare payments, and they want to solve it, our door is always open. But no, man, David, thank you very much. It was a good interview. It was good fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.